it's weird, but like I'm still obsessed like I was in high school with skiing, like where you think about it all the time, and I'll just be thinking about like what I want to do and like how I'm gonna do it, and like even just thinking about skiing, like it'll make my heart like pump. And it's like you said, like moving the needle. Like the needle has moved, and it moved because of people, because of active citizens who got out there and they wrote their congressmen and they protested and they made their voices heard, and it works. I just wanted to like get as good as I could get and go cool places. Like I really wanted to just be able to go on trips and like experience new things and like ski with people, like ski with new people, and just like see where it would take me.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Athletic Stance podcast. I am very excited to have today's guest on. He is not only an awesome skier, a very laid-back guy, but a political activist who is taking on some big steps in environmentalism, especially regarding some of the bigger controversial waterways in the western half of the United States, and we'll dig a lot more into this in the podcast and talk about kind of what he sees the future looking like, or what he hopes to see in the future from all of his hard work. But without further ado, I'm going to let the man speak for himself. Let's welcome Erik Balken to the show.
My name is Erik Balken. I grew up in Salt Lake City, and most people who grow up in Salt Lake will ski at least a few times a year. It's pretty common here because we're so close to the mountains. And I skied as a kid, but it wasn't really like a serious thing. Like I never raced or anything like that. I would, my family would take me up to go skiing probably like 5 or 10 times a season, something like that. And it wasn't until high school that I got like really into skiing. I think I was about 15 years old. It was the freshman year of high school, and Park City started to offer these like $100 season passes. And basically my friend was like, yo, you need to get your shit together and get a pass, and I'll drive you up there. And I was like, sweet, I don't have any gear. And then my other friend was just like, here you can borrow, like I have an old pair of boots and skis. So I just had like all hand-me-down gear, and, basically was pushed by my friends to get into it in high school. And really that first season, I just immediately fell in love with it. It was, good snow year, and I was really into skateboarding when I was younger, like junior high, elementary school, high school. I was super into skateboarding and jumping down stairs and all that sort of stuff. And when I got into skiing and I realized that like you could go a lot bigger on skis and it hurt a lot less, I was like, oh shit, like this is the jam. Like I need to be getting into this. I have a very specific memory when it fully clicked for me, and I was like, I'm doing this. It was in Park City. I think it was my freshman year or sophomore year of high school. And so this would be back in like 2002. And we were hiking up off the McConkey chair, I think it was. And there's like this little ridge hike you can do, and there's some cornices to jump off of. Some of my friends were just like jumping off of it. And I had started to learn how to do 360s on the little park jumps and whatnot there. And I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to go for it. And I just like, I was so scared, but I just pointed it and I tried a 360 off of this cornice. And I just remember like flying off of it and looking down, and it was probably only like 15 feet off the ground, but that was like the biggest I'd ever gone at that point. I just remember looking down and like being like, holy shit, I'm so far out there. And it was just the cool, and I, of course I like blew up in the landing. I did a full yard sail and like just totally exploded. But I just remember that feeling, like the weightlessness in my stomach. And and my friends were just like, holy shit, man, that was so cool. And it was just like, wow, this is fucking fun. And you can get away with murder, basically. If there's good snow, you can really do some stupid shit without killing yourself. That was like the moment. That was the moment I was like, this is my new shit. Now this is my jam. I'm gonna start doing this. as much as I can. And so I really got into it in high school and just skied a lot. And then freshman year of college, I went to school in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Yeah.
Which was cool. I wanted to leave Salt Lake and experience living somewhere else just to kind of like learn and grow a little bit. And they have a mountain close to town there, Arizona Snow Bowl. It's nothing like crazy, but it was really good snow year that year. And I ended up spending basically like all of my free time and money and like a lot of my energy just trying to be on the mountain all the time. And my other buddy who moved to school in California, he was doing the same thing. Like he was down in UC Irvine, and he was always making trips to Mammoth and like spending a lot of time just like, we were both like spending all this energy. And we just talked one day and we were like, dude, we should move back to Salt Lake, rent a house together, go to the University of Utah, pay in-state tuition, and just ski like real snow. And we both kind of like talked each other into it. And so we moved back. And so I went to the University of Utah, finished up my degree there. And I got a bachelor's in geography and environmental studies, and was skiing a lot in college, like skiing as much as I could, taking like, we would work at night, work like in the off season, taking classes like Tuesday and Thursday, whatever, trying to ski as much as possible. I think my skiing was sort of getting better throughout that whole time, like high school and college and stuff. Like in high school, and college more into like park skiing and whatnot, and sort of learning how to ski off of cliffs and do tricks. And then it really was like after college, I kind of hit this point where I was like, well, I either need to like buckle down and try to get like a career job or go to like grad school or something, or I could really try to pursue skiing and try to make something out of it. And basically that was the point when I decided that I wanted to like get sponsored and try to like really go for it and step it up. And I basically told myself like, I'm going to take the next like season or two and like just really try as hard as I can. Just like do everything I can to like push my skiing, try to film or whatever, take photos and try new stuff and see where it takes me and see if I can get some sponsors. And I just told myself that if I could get like one sponsor, or if I could get like one published photo and just get my foot in the door a little bit, that I would just like keep doing it. And I did. I was able to swing it, and I started to get, I think I was probably at that point, I was like 23 or 24. And that's when I sort of started to get some sponsor support and get photos in magazines and that sort of stuff. And then, yeah, I've just tried to keep it going from there. And it's been a lot of fun. Also maintaining like sort of a career path simultaneously, which has also been nice.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there's like, as a skier, you generally have to find some sort of other supplemental income, unless you're like sponsored by Red Bull or have like, there are certain sponsors, or you get a certain amount of sponsorship from a certain brand and you can probably make it work for a living. But I think most people, even at a high level in skiing, end up having to do other things to support and supplement their income. And I think that work-life balance is really important, and especially finding the appropriate job, because skiers are generally people that already pursue their passion. Like, you just want to pursue what you want to pursue, and there's like, it's like, I think a lot of people are allergic to the 9-to-5 job, right? So you end up being a server, or because you can make decent money in as a server in a mountain town, or since there is Salt Lake, you have more of an infrastructure, but a lot of mountain towns, you end up in the hospitality business, because it's where everyone makes their money, is off of tourism. So I think it would be really cool to explore the progression of the career side of things on the non-skiing, as well as the trajectory on the other side.
Totally. I totally agree about the work-life balance for, funding a ski season and just kind of having other passions in life that you're fulfilling simultaneously. So for me, I was studying environmental studies in college, and I had in high school done some volunteer work with different nonprofits around Salt Lake. And I was working at a pizza place actually in college, and this guy came in and ordered some pizzas, and he was like, "Hey, like, what are you studying?" And I told him I was doing environmental studies. He was like, "Oh, that's so cool. Have you ever like worked with any nonprofits?" And I was like, "Yeah, I work for these groups, and I know, so and so over there." And he was like, "Oh, so and so's on our board. I run this organization called Glen Canyon Institute. You should come up and work for us." And I was like, "Okay." And he gave me his card, and I followed up with him, and I met with him like the week after that, and I started working for them as a kind of like office lackey, for $8 an hour, and that was in 2006. So that's what, 12 years ago. That's coming up on 12, 13 years ago. So yeah, man, it just started as like a menial office job, and then I slowly like grew at the organization. And so this was all throughout college. I was working at GCI, and I was working at other jobs as well. I was doing landscaping and gardening and that sort of thing throughout. And yeah, like I think 2013 or 2014, our director quit. And by that point, I was the outreach director, and I was running around and giving presentations and talking to people and doing a lot of that sort of stuff. She was basically like, "You should run the organization." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even consider that." And but yeah, basically I just kind of took it over, which was kind of a scary thing because I still, I was 27, and I still wanted to put a lot of time into skiing. And initially I was like, "Oh, there's no way I could like be the head of a nonprofit organization and still be like a sponsored skier." She was like, "Oh, you totally can." She's like, "You totally can do it." She's like, "I have kids." She's like, "You don't have kids." She's like, "Having kids is the hardest thing ever." And I actually talked to a couple other people who work in different nonprofits, and they were like, "Oh man, you can totally do it. Just go for it." Like, and I figured like the worst thing that could happen is that I would fail and try something else. So yeah, I took over unofficially, I think, for the first 2 years. It was like 13, 14, 15. And then I think in 2015, I officially became the executive director, with the understanding that I would go part-time in the winter. And that schedule works pretty well for us because a lot of our fundraising and events and big stuff is happening spring, summer, fall. So it actually worked out pretty well that I could still ski a decent amount and, still hold it down at the office. And that's just something you can get away with in Salt Lake, because I can go ski. If I wake up early, I can go ski and get like a great morning in, ski for like 3 or 4 hours, and get down to the office by like 10 or 11 after like a pretty awesome day of skiing, and get stuff done, and then go home and make it all fit. And so I really feel fortunate to have fallen into that path. And, in some ways there was a long time when I sort of envied my friends who were like real pro skiers who were like fully living off of it. It was like, oh man, like that's the dream. Like, looking back on it now, because I'm 32 now, so I've sort of been in that mode for like 4 or 5 years now, and like looking back on it, I'm like, no, like I think this is better, because there's times when you get injured, if you like hurt your knee or your shoulder or something, you can't ski, and that's all you have is skiing. You're kind of sitting there like, fuck, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And for me, like if I'm injured, I'm like, I have so much shit to do. This is like the perfect opportunity to catch up on my work. And so I've never had all my eggs in one basket, and like financially and like intellectually, like I've never felt stuck in one thing. And so I've been really grateful for that now, like looking back and being able to have like a career job with a salary, but that also, like, obviously I don't get to ski as much as I want to, but I don't think anybody really skis as much as they want to. And in some ways too, like having other life obligations, it makes skiing better when you do go ski. It's like, think about like high school, like skiing in high school, you'd have to ski on weekends, or you like cut class and go ski for like a little bit, and you'd ski for like an hour, but you do it. And when you get to the mountain, you'd be so pumped because you knew that it was like this special thing. You only had this little window of time, and you're just going to go as hard as possible. And I kind of still see skiing that way. Like, I know, that I have these other obligations in life, and that my time on the mountain is really precious. And so I really try to take it for what it is, and really absorb it. So, it's not a really traditional like path of like a pro skier. I don't really consider myself a pro skier. I think I'm like a part-time pro skier. Like, I do make some money from it, but it's certainly not my primary source of income. And it's just like a passion. And for me, like, what I've always wanted to get out of skiing, and when I kind of made that decision that I was going to pursue it, like, I didn't want to get sponsored so I could, make money off of it, or like be like the coolest dude around who everybody knew and like was world famous. I never wanted to like get on that level. I just wanted to like get as good as I could get and go cool places. Like, I really wanted to just be able to go on trips and like experience new things, and like ski with people, like ski with new people, and just like see where it would take me. So it was really like, my goal has always been to like have this exceptional experience and like push my own skill levels and knowledge and that sort of thing. And with that like intention, I think I've had a really rewarding ski career.
Yeah, totally. I think that, it's one of those things where, like take alcohol or like some like a drug, for instance. Like it's fun the first time you do it, but you start doing it all the time and you need it. And I think the same can go for, skiing, where there's diminishing returns sometimes. And it's not truth for everyone. Obviously, you can get creative. There are people who love skiing so much, and it's not about progression, or it is about progression, and they are always achieving the type of progression that they're wanting. But I think that it's one of those things that it's good to have a very healthy balance, and to limit the amount of diminishing returns, because even I have a friend in the entrepreneurial world who has dreamed of going heli skiing for a lot of her life. She got to go last year, and then was doing so well this year that she was able to go for like 2.5 weeks. And she was talking about how by the end of the 2.5 weeks, it was so routine to her, it wasn't even as that fairy tale life that you make it out to be. And I think that it's really important to, like, at the core of that is like distilling purpose. And I think a lot of what you have in the Glen Canyon Institute and some of the other policy and stuff that you've been involved in, it allows you to have that purpose, right? And allows you to have that time to know that you have other responsibilities, and that like it's okay to have other responsibilities.
Yeah, for sure. And like, just not being able to ski all the time, like, it makes you hungry, man. Like, you got to have that hunger.
Yeah.
Like, I have a lot of times where I can't ski and I wish I could, and I will have time to like go to the gym or something. If I can't ski, I'll try to at least go like spin on the bike for a half hour or something at the gym. And God, I'm like, it's weird, but like, I'm still obsessed like I was in high school with skiing, like where you think about it all the time. And I'll like go spin on the bike, and like, I'll just be thinking about like what I want to do and like how I'm going to do it. And like, even just thinking about skiing, like, it'll make my heart like pump, and it'll, increase my heart rate. And like, I can just get stoked just like closing my eyes and just thinking about it, it's cool, man. It still makes me feel like a kid, and I hope I can just keep that level of stoke going for as long as possible, which I think I can.
Yeah, no, seriously. I think, like you look at the people out in, in their 70s, 80s, and 90s out on the hill that are just like loving life. And they, I watched All I Can recently, and it's got like Mary Woodward and crew. And like, they just are like, they're like in their 80s and 90s, and they just are absolutely loving life. And I think that's really what it's about at the end of the day. And yeah, it's really easy, I think, when you are pursuing being the cool person that everyone knows, or being any sort of that archetypal character in the ski industry, it's really easy to burn yourself out, or create kind of an impossible feedback loop. so something that eventually you're not going to be able to complete the cycle, and that can break you.
Totally. Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it, like the feedback loop. The other thing for me too that I'm so grateful about, with me and the sponsors that I have now, I really, like, in the last couple of years, reached this place with skiing where I don't feel pressure to like do crazy shit, and like if it's deep snow or if it's like bomber conditions, like I'll push myself there. But like I've definitely seen it with other people through skiing throughout the years where it's like they have sponsors or they want to get sponsored, or you're trying to film a video part or something, and there's like a very serious pressure to like throw it down. And that you can feed off of it and it can be like a good thing, which I've experienced too, but it can also be like a really negative thing and it can totally take the fun out of it. And I'm just so grateful that I'm in a spot with my sponsors and like with the setup that I have. Like basically I just am out there to have fun and I document it with my friends and it works out. But I still want to push myself and like try new lines and try new tricks. And like, I'm always thinking about stuff, but just not having that pressure of like, I've seen with like other, full-time pro skiers where it's like, you got to put out a video part and you don't have any clips and you have 2 months. So like, you better make it happen. And if you blow your knee, you're going to lose all your sponsors and it fucks with you, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. And it's one of those things where all of a sudden the fun can be taken out of it, and the passion becomes an occupation. And sometimes that is the very worst thing that can happen for a passion, because then you literally are going to work on something that was supposed to never feel like work, quote unquote. And I think, there's some fairy tale illusions, some smoke and mirrors that some stories that we buy into sometimes when it comes down to what the fairy tale life should look like and how easy life should be. But yeah, I think that it's really easy. Like it can ruin friendships. It can ruin, relationships with professionals as far as filmers, photographers, other people, when you put so much pressure on yourself. Like I've definitely had times where I have felt so much internal pressure that I start to combust and implode. And then like some of my anger that is inwardly facing all of a sudden starts outwardly facing, and I'm not I'm not the fun person to be around. And then like skiing's not worth losing friendships. It's supposed to be a tribe thing. It's supposed to be where you create friendships and lifelong, people to spend time with.
Yeah, it's tricky, man, because like you're saying, you don't want to like get in that headspace where you're getting angry at yourself. But like, if you want to make anything of it, it does require a huge amount of work and a lot of commitment, and just it's like time. Like, I mean, especially in Colorado, from what I've heard, like having to drive to go skiing, it's like I've heard nightmare stories about that. But it's just it takes a lot of time and commitment, and sometimes you're like, fuck, is this even like worth like pursuing like as just a hobby or passion or like a professional endeavor? It's like, is it worth it? I don't, so it is like this balance of like keeping a solid work ethic, putting in the work, not getting too frustrated while also having fun. It's a hard thing to balance. I go in and out of it. Some days I hate myself a lot, and then other days I like feel really on top of it.
Yeah, totally. And I think, that's part of the another part of the illusion of the fairy tale story is that like you're supposed to have an even keel emotion about everything that happens in your life, and like that's just not true. Like sometimes you forget your ski socks. Sometimes you're trying to hit, you're trying to land a certain trick and it's just not coming together, and it's a stock trick and you should have it. And like sometimes the cameraman the photographer forgets their card, Like there's so many things that add up to it. And I think resiliency, being able to go with the flow. And it's something that you learn a lot when you do spend so much time in the mountains, because there's nothing predictable about the mountains besides change and unpredictability.
Totally.
Right.
Totally. And I think for me too, like because I'm not like, sometimes I even wonder why I'm sponsored, because I'm definitely not like the gnarliest big mountain skier, and like I don't have like the biggest bag of tricks. I think my edge in skiing has always been that I just am a hard worker, and I'm gonna just try to go out there as much as possible and like wake up early. And because I think like for how I really started to get sponsors was just through shooting with photographers. There's a lot of ski photographers in Salt Lake.
Oh yeah.
I got the opportunity to start shooting with them through my buddy Karsten. He sort of like invited me one day to go shoot with Jay Beyer, and they're like, yo, if you want to come, we got an open spot. And I was like, all right. I was like, I know this is a big opportunity. I'm going to work my butt off. And like, people that don't do it maybe don't realize like how much work it is to shoot ski photos. Cause it's kind of like, oh, you're just doing like a one turn, but it's like, you wake up early, you're hiking up in the dark for sunrise, and then you like trying to nail this shot. And then you immediately you like make a couple turns, you take off your skis and you like boot right back up. You're like wallowing through powder and boot back up, and then you do it again and you just like do that. And it's like, oh, let's try to get this shot over here. And you're like kind of on this race, making the use of that first hour of light.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a ton of work. And it's like, it's really hard actually, to like get that many, get a lot of like good photos in one morning session like that. And, I just like tried to give myself a reputation of being someone who works really hard, or like if you're filming with other people, or you got some buddies that are like, hey, like come build a jump. Like when that happens, it's like, yeah, you're going to go and you're going to put in a ton of work. You're going to help other people get their shots. So when it comes time for you to get your shots, they're going to like be patient and give you the time and space to do that as well.
Yeah.
And, that's it, kind of like what goes around comes around in that sense. And I think that's always been my, like kind of what helped me get my start with skiing, is that I was able to just be like, yo, I'm going to give this 100%. Like if you want to go shoot, like I'm going to work for this, this, like treat it like a job basically. Like I'm going to put in the work for the next like 2 hours or whatever we're doing, and like try as hard as I can. That's, and I think that's sort of how I got it. And then I started to get that. So that morning that I got invited with Jay and Karsten, that was when I got my first published photo, and that ended up being the cover of Backcountry magazine, which was cool. It was like my first photo was a cover photo, and I was like, oh shit, I made it, kind of.
Right? Yeah, no, that's incredible. And a lot of the industry is working with the right people. Like they say that it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's who you know, and it's also like this random kind of the way that everything comes together, because like, did the photographer get the right frame on the jump, on the whatever that allows, that makes that spotlights the trick in that certain way? And then like, does that photographer have good relationships with the publishers? And then did the editor or publisher like the way that captures attention for the type of stories that that issue is running? And like there's just so many factors that add up to that thing. And I think it is it's something that benefited me was hard work. I was always at one of the things in Crested Butte with getting being sponsored by Crested Butte for a while, and then being able to go out and shoot with other photographers when I was living in Big Sky, and everything was, yeah, you show your hard work, and you are constantly, so many people are like, I want to get sponsored because I want the sick gear, because I want this, that, or the other thing. And I think most of the time people go about it, and this is a young perspective. I think people who are, when you get older, you understand it a lot more, but it's not what they can do for you, it's what you can do for them to earn their support and to earn, whatever it is. And a lot of the times it is just the hard work. And another thing in reference to the hard work and everything, like I've shot past golden hour all day with photographers, and sometimes you get like your favorite 3 runs on the mountain that you would have gotten the sickest first tracks on and everything. You watch people ski the line that you wanted to ski and then the next line that you picked out while the photographer is setting up their stuff, and you're like, like sometimes you're just like, you want to, shoot yourself you feel like you're shooting yourself in the foot, because the whole point of skiing is to have fun skiing, and then you're watching everyone ski your line or.
Yeah, man, that's like these days, because when I first started, like I was saying, that's how I got sponsored basically, is because I shot with, really talented photographers and was able to get in magazines and all that. And when I was doing that, like I shot photos so much, but I didn't have any we didn't have good cameras to like film with at that time. And so I spent a lot of years like just shooting photos, and that sort of fucks with your skiing a little bit. And like you were saying, when you're, like even if you get early ups at a resort, you're like, oh, this is so cool. We got on the chair early. And then you're like sitting there on a cliff waiting for the sun to come out for like 20 minutes. And then everybody starts skiing by you and they're like having fun. And you're like, oh, sorry, I'm working.
Right. Yeah.
Like nowadays I am trying to shoot as much video as I can, just because video, you're like actually skiing,
Yeah.
You're like actually skiing consistently. That's kind of cool too with like GoPro now. Like the quality of helmet cams is so good now, and I think it's like gotten to the point where that content that you can get with a helmet cam is actually like the image quality is good enough that it's like fun to watch. And so like I've really enjoyed just doing that, just going skiing at my home resorts and just ripping around Brighton or whatever, and just like wearing a GoPro and just like hitting my cliffs that I know super well, and just like I'm like, hey, like, yeah, I'm doing my shooting thing, I'm just doing it by myself and like having fun.
Yeah. GoPro has definitely changed the game, like helmet cams in general, but GoPro has definitely changed the game when it comes to that ability to have fun and like have your solo days, or even shredding around with homies, because you get to watch the homie get off, send it, and maybe you send it behind them and you get it on cam. Or I think that's how I stumbled into your stuff, was on Instagram from hanging out in Japan, or maybe it was that, or maybe it was, did you go down to Arizona recently?
That's southern Utah.
Okay.
But yeah, it was down in the desert.
Yeah, totally. It was one of those 2 shots, one of those 2 clips, and I was like, oh dang, like they're getting after it. That the one from southern Utah was like so cool, just because of all the orange, red rock and like different geological formations that you don't really see in skiing very often. It's like the whole point of skiing is having fun with friends and freedom and a whole other list of things that go along with it. But
having fun with friends is like the main thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like GoPro has allowed that to happen a lot more, and you can even get decent screen grabs. They're not going to be something that you necessarily want to blow up on a full spread in a magazine, but they'll do for Instagram and stuff like that,
Dude, and I think there's something to be said for Instagram too, like, because we all hate on it, because there's so much like inauthentic kind of bullshit that you see on Instagram, and like it can kind of be a time suck if you like get too stuck in the world, and like you get FOMO. There's like watching what everybody's doing, but at the same time, like it's fucking awesome that you can, if you're some kid out there who's good at skiing and your friend has a phone, like you can put it out there and like people are gonna see it. And I think that's so cool. Like the same, like with the technology of GoPro and stuff, like it's so different from when I was first getting sponsored, and like I think when I got sponsored, it was like 2011 or something, 2010. When I was first getting sponsored, then my sponsors were like, we want you in magazines, like we want you shooting as much as possible so you can get in magazines, and we want content for our blog.
Right.
And now everyone's just like, so we want like we want 100,000 impressions on Instagram. It's like,
Yeah.
okay. Which is I think it's cool because it's just like a really fun and interesting way to like just see what everyone's doing. You're sort of like watching this season-long ski movie of like all of your friends. And I don't know. I really do love Instagram for that, and like especially people that are real and like show their like struggles and challenges too. And you get like this inside look into what's actually going on and how people are getting after it. Like I think that stuff is so cool. And I think for me it's been a big tool, like getting my photos and video and whatnot out there to the world. I hope that the ski industry doesn't fully move away from printed magazines, because I think that will always have value. And even though like some of them are going away, and like you probably heard about Transworld Snowboarding.
Transworld Snowboarding. Oh man.
I'm like, did that happen because people don't want to read magazines anymore, or did it happen because they were running a crappy business? I don't know. But I can't ever imagine Powder Magazine going away. Like I wouldn't want to go full digital. Like I've tried reading, ebooks and stuff, and like I just want to hold paper in my hand. Like I don't think that's ever going to go away. So I hope that part of the industry like stays true, because there's just something special about like being able to pick up a magazine and like see printed photos and like actually reading stories, like physically holding it in your hand. I hope that doesn't go away, but I don't know.
Yeah, totally. I love having a couple magazines on the coffee table in the living room and being able, friends come over and flip through them, or, you get a magazine, and especially like fall, and flip through and like start getting stoked about new gear, just the season. Like I've really, because I have started to develop my own marketing and media agency, then I start to look at what magazines are doing for ads, and like, you start to I don't know. There's definitely something, like I'm with you on the ebook thing. I can't read an ebook. Someone tells me like, oh, I have a book for you, and then they send it like an ebook. I'm like, well, shit, I guess I'm printing that out. Like, and even that's like not as, I would prefer to have like an actual book that's, normal size with the crease in the middle. And yeah, there's just something about it.
It's bad for your eyeballs, man. Eyeballs can't handle staring at a screen. Like if you're going to work at an office job or creative, any job, basically you're going to be looking at a screen. And then if you're looking at, your phone for another hour out of your day or 2 hours, and then like reading a book at night, like on another screen, it's too much.
Yeah, totally. And I know like Kindle, like the Kindle White, Kindle, like some of them have, like they eliminate the colored light, and it, it doesn't have as much of an effect on your endocrine system. And like there's a whole bunch of scientific research that you can, like delve pretty far into. But yeah, I mean, I don't wear prescription glasses, but I'm on the computer so much that I have blue blockers.
Do they work?
Yeah, totally.
What brand are they?
These are Movement MVMT.
I'll have to check that out. I've sort of been looking into those. Everything I read says they don't do anything, but then if you read customer reviews, everybody loves them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm going to have to try that out.
It could be placebo. You never know. Like,
sometimes placebo is the best remedy.
It is. I think most of the time placebo is the best remedy. Like the mind is so powerful, and being able to think things into existence is a powerful tool of the human psyche. That's for sure.
Totally.
Yeah, I think there's so much value, and there's value to patience. Like we talked about feedback loops, and there's so much value to the patience of like not having things, the instantaneous, slowing down, like there's so many different forms of media, and slowing it down to where, like, reading a story, books are always 100 times better than movies, and slowing it down to actually pay attention. I think it's going to become more rare, but it's going to become maybe more valued, kind of in the same way that, the less you ski, the more you value it,
Totally. I like that analogy.
bringing it full circle. So yeah, where did your love of the environment and the nonprofit work, where did that all come from? Obviously you were out skiing with your fam a little bit, but like what did that look like? How did that come to fruition?
Well, when I was growing up in Salt Lake, we would go down to the desert all the time for family vacation and stuff. And we'd go down to like Arches and Zion National Park and all those spots, Capitol Reef. And so when I was a little kid, that was like, the desert's already amazing, but when you're a kid and you're playing around in like Arches and Hoodoos and like Red Rock landscape, it is like you're on another planet, and like you just go crazy. So I sort of had this ingrained in me since I was a little kid that the desert was just like the most magical place in the world. So I always had a love for it. And then in high school, I got into reading like Ed Abbey books, Desert Solitaire,
Mm-hmm.
which is still my favorite book of all time, probably. Anyone who's listening to this who hasn't read it should go read it. And that book really changed the direction of my life, I think, because it sort of articulated a lot of the things that I had felt like with my experiences in the wild and the desert. And sort of, it's like Ed Abbey's manifesto about like why we should have wilderness. And it's, some people can look at it as like an anti-growth kind of concept, but I really don't think it's like that. I think it's just like valuing the like absence of people, not so much hating people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always had a really big impact on me. And I had friends in high school too who were volunteering for environmental groups. So that's sort of how I got into that world, basically, is I just had friends. So we would volunteer for like SUA, like Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance. I would go on field trips with them where we would dig out illegal roads and like put up signs that get shot down and that sort of stuff. And I just sort of like grew this a different level of appreciation. There's like a level of appreciation where you're just having fun and you're like, man, this place is so cool. I love it. I'm having fun. And then you get to the next level of appreciation and respect where you're just like, wow, I love this place so much. Like if I don't work to protect it, like it might disappear, And I think I started to get into that realm of, I don't know what you want to call it, like responsibility that you take upon yourself to like do something to help it. Because there is, like in Southern Utah, there's a lot of like illegal off-road vehicle trails and stuff that kind of just fuck up spots, So it's like, there's certain spots where I think it's awesome to go ride motos and ATVs and stuff. And then there's certain spots where you shouldn't do it because it's like a pristine wilderness area. And I would see like certain spots that got really fucked up from like illegal off-road vehicles. And so that's, sort of why I got into that whole realm of like conservation work. And that's why I chose environmental studies when I went to college. And, the other big thing too is that I started running rivers in high school. Again, just basically my friends invited me along. I guess it all comes down to my friends just inviting me places.
And you saying yes.
And saying yes. But I had some friends who invited me on river trips, which is like, you have to have gear you have to get invited. You can't just, people don't usually be like, oh, I'm going to start like rafting. There's so much fucking gear that if you don't have somebody, it's the same with skiing. Like it's so gear intensive that if somebody doesn't like hold your hand a little bit in the beginning, it's probably not going to happen. But I got really into river rafting in high school because basically, like with floating rivers, you're going into these beautiful landscapes with like full, what you would only be able to get to through like backpacking, like a really pristine nature experience. except you can bring as much beer as you can carry, which is a lot. And it's just like this like best combination of all worlds where you can just like fully enjoy yourself in this amazing environment. So I totally fell in love with rivers in high school, and I'm still in love with rivers. I try to do as many rafting trips as I can every summer. And so, when I was working at the pizza place, and Rich, who's the president of GCI and the founder, was like, "Hey, I run this group, and we're working to restore Glen Canyon, which is under Lake Powell, most of it on the Colorado River."
Yep.
I was like, wow, I didn't even know there was a group that was trying to do something about that. But, like after reading at Abbey and like learning about Glen Canyon and knowing about that, like Glen Canyon was the most incredible like section of river that ever, like people who were, who ran it before the dam was built in 1963. They considered it to be more beautiful than the Grand Canyon in a lot of ways. It was very different. It wasn't, the walls weren't as steep and dramatic, and there weren't rapids, but it was this, quiet, beautiful, amazing place with just hundreds of side canyons. Like if you compare it to other river trips, like other rivers hardly even compare. So Glen Canyon is just, it's like the heart of the Colorado Plateau. And it's also this really kind of symbol of like where we went wrong as a society. Like it was our biggest environmental mistake. So when I got the opportunity to work for Glen Canyon Institute, I thought it was sort of serendipitous. And I was like, this is, for whatever reason, like this path is sort of being, it's appearing in front of me, and I just have to keep going for it. And so I've just continued doing it. And sometimes I can't believe that I've been working for GCI for coming up on 13 years. Like that's crazy. And it's not really, it doesn't follow like your traditional, like successful career path where you work for somewhere for 3 years and then you move on and then you work for somewhere else for 3 years and then you like move up. And like, I've just, I really love the organization, and I love the work that we're doing. And I'm very passionate about it. And basically like it's, so much is changing. Like I'm in this position where I feel like I'm actually get to have a little bit of influence on what's happening. And I'm so grateful for that, and for all the people that I've been able to meet and work with in that realm. But yeah, like Colorado River politics are changing so fast, and it's such a cool realm to be in. I mean, I don't know how deep you want to go into that world, but like, yeah, it's an exciting place to be.
I would love to explore it if you're willing to, because I mean, environmentalism is so tied into skiing in general, and I think we learn about so many pieces of history that maybe are less relatable to the world that we live in, and you can always find correlation and you can always find significance in any other human story that's ever existed, because we are humans, and our stories are each powerful. But yeah, I mean, Monkey Wrench Gang for me was definitely a very influential book in high school. Yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more about like some of the places where you feel like you're accomplishing, being able to move the needle a little bit, because I think we all want a voice, and especially when it comes down to protect our winners and, being able to make a difference in the world. We all want a voice. We all want to be able to see, even if it's a minute shift, having that feedback to give hope, so that way the grassroots movement can continue to progress more and more and more. So anything that you want to contribute on what you're seeing, how you feel like that has unfolded, and just like any sort of hope that you can pass along to to people in our generation, above or below, that really describes the journey, and just any sort of thing that you can offer there.
I'll try to give you the quick version. So basically, Glen Canyon Dam was commissioned in 1956. It's passed through it's the Colorado River Storage Project Act of 1956. It was passed by Congress, and it authorized several dams in the Colorado River Basin, including Glen Canyon Dam, Flaming Gorge Dam, Blue Mesa, and Fontanelle Dam, I think. And basically, it's this big infrastructure project to build dams in the what's known as the upper Colorado River Basin. So that's above the Utah-Arizona border. And when that was passed, when Glen Canyon Dam was commissioned, there were no environmental laws in the United States. There was no Endangered Species Act. There was no National Environmental Policy Act. There was no Environmental Protection Agency. There was no way to have oversight over a big project like this and have a system to check, is this going to have a negative impact on the environment, or would anyone care? And it was, so that was like the context in which the Glen Canyon Dam was commissioned. And it was completed in 1963, and there weren't enough people that knew about Glen Canyon to make a stink about it at that time. But people started going down to Glen Canyon after this dam was built because the Sierra Club famously made this sort of big deal with the Bureau of Reclamation because they wanted to build a dam up in Dinosaur National Monument and up by Split Mountain, kind of like on where the Lador comes down through the Green River through Dinosaur National Monument. And the Sierra Club, that was first becoming like a powerful environmental group, they made this deal where they were basically like, okay, as long as you don't build a dam in Dinosaur, you can build a dam down in Glen Canyon, because we've never been there and we don't know what it is. People after that happened, they were like, what the hell are you doing? Like, that's like 6 dinosaurs down there. So anyways, this idea of like draining Lake Powell, or like in the Monkey Wrench gang that want to blow up Glen Canyon Dam, that's been around since 1963, ever since they built that dam. And it's always been an environmental pipe dream. And people have always been like, oh yeah, that'll never happen. But it's important because Glen Canyon was a focal point for the American environmental movement. It really engaged a lot of people, and people realized like how much of an impact these big dams had, because it totally changed the ecosystem of the Colorado River. Because of Glen Canyon Dam, we have 4 endangered fish species. There's no, the sediment in the Grand Canyon downstream is only 5% of what it was before the dam that comes in through tributaries. And of course, now we know that there is this impact and it does affect species. And these fish species only exist on the Colorado River. They don't exist anywhere else in the world. The Colorado River has the highest rate of endemism, which means species that only live there. So it's basically like one of the most unique ecosystems on the planet. Probably worth fighting for, so it was basically looked at as this big disaster. And, even the people who work for the Department of Interior and Bureau of Reclamation will admit that, and they'll admit that they are these bad impacts. And even people who love Lake Powell, like I have a lot of family and friends who go to Lake Powell, and like, I get the appeal, and they're like, well, even though they're like, I wish it weren't built, but it's here. It's, they built it, it's there. And that's kind of like always been the mentality. And so what's changed and what's making this so interesting now is climate change has really started to change this conversation. When our organization was started in 1996, Lake Powell was basically full, and people were like, you guys are just nuts. Like, this is crazy. But the whole mission of Glen Canyon Institute was to create a legitimate argument to say, can we actually seriously talk about draining Lake Powell and getting Glen Canyon back? Like, could we even do it? It wasn't even like, just go drain it and, tear it down because it's the right thing to do. But it was always about starting to build scientific research to look at this, because when the dam was built, they didn't do any scientific research to see what the impacts would be. So the Colorado River is famously over allocated. They thought that there was going to be a lot more water flowing in the river than there actually is. So it's already set up for this kind of like supply and demand imbalance from the get-go. And then add climate change into the mix, it really compounds that effect. So in 1999, Lake Powell was basically 100% full. There's Lake Powell and Lake Mead. They're the 2 sister reservoirs of the Colorado River. They're the 2 biggest reservoirs in the country. The Colorado River Basin is split into an upper basin and a lower basin. Lake Powell and Glen Canyon Dam exist so that the upper basin can hang on to its water that it's allowed to under the Colorado River Compact, and have this legal amount of water that so it can deliver water downstream in low years and keep extra water upstream so that California doesn't use it. That's why the dam exists. It doesn't exist for hydropower. People aren't using that water for farms or cities. It doesn't exist for reservoir recreation. That reservoir is there for water storage. That's the primary purpose. So in 1999, Lake Powell was basically 100% full. And that's when we started to see the, quote unquote drought start to happen. So we had 4 really awful snow years. By 2005, Lake Powell was at 33% of capacity. So keep that in mind. It went from 100% capacity to 33% capacity in about 5 years. So now Lake Powell is at 37% capacity, and Lake Mead is at about 40% capacity. So the total water storage between both of those reservoirs is now the lowest it's ever been since Glen Canyon Dam started filling, since Lake Powell started filling in the 1960s. So we're at this really critical point where we know there's not enough water in the system to keep these reservoirs full. These reservoirs were, the dams were built to catch excess water, but there's no more excess water. So now you could completely drain Lake Powell into Lake Mead, and Lake Mead would only be like 80% full. So if Glen Canyon Dam was one of the most, egregious environmental mistakes in our country's history, like, why wouldn't we at least study the idea of, moving that water downstream and getting Glen Canyon back? And it's a political challenge. It's not an engineering challenge or anything like that. It's primarily a political challenge because it's like a bank account, and it's just an accounting issue. It's a really hard accounting issue, but that's sort of the basis of like what's happening with the Colorado River, which is so cool. And our organization has, we've facilitated studies on hydrology and economics and the law of the river, looking at this idea that we call fill mead first. Basically, it was kind of like we're trying to take this like passion and like the ethos of like, Ed Abbey, and like we want to tear down this dam because it was the biggest, sin against nature. Kind of taking that passion and love for the river and translating into a sensible like policy proposal. That we call that the fill mead first proposal. It's like, okay, if it's a mistake, like it's not a mistake we have to live with necessarily. And people are starting to take it seriously, which is why I'm still doing it and why I'm still engaged in it. Because even from when I started 12 years ago compared to now, like people take it way more seriously. That we had an article in the New York Times, like Sunday front page New York Times, talking about, this move to restore Glen Canyon. The Bureau of Reclamation is actually starting to study it. So it's like starting to happen very incrementally, and people are starting to see, and it's because of climate change, basically. Like there's not enough water to fill up these reservoirs anymore. So people are starting to look at these alternatives. And it's a water supply issue in their eyes from the government. They have this job of supplying water to people and cities and farms and towns, which is a huge responsibility. But there's also this environmental, recreational, spiritual element to it where, there's this chance that we're going to get Glen Canyon back. And it's probably going to happen in our lifetime. I think it's going to happen, to be honest with you. I mean, it's not going to be the same as it was before the reservoir, but a lot of those side canyons restore really quickly. They fill up with sediment when the reservoir is full. During the drawdown, flash floods come through and they flush out the sediment, and a lot of the natural wildlife and habitat have been reemerging, which is something we've been trying to document and promote as well. And it's just this amazing thing that's happening, and it's such an integral part of the history of the American environmentalism. Because what happened in the 60s after Glen Canyon Dam was built, when people realized what was lost, they were infuriated. When they saw Glen Canyon after, and this was in large part because of the Sierra Club, they published this book of photography by Elliot Porter, The Place No One Knew, really famous book. They're coffee table books. And people were like, holy shit, like if we don't step up and like make our voices heard, like we're going to lose everything. And at that time, the Bureau of Reclamation wanted to dam every section of the river so not a drop was wasted by reaching the sea. That's their stated goal. Dam every section of rivers so not a drop is wasted by reaching the sea. And they wanted to build 2 dams in the Grand Canyon. And because of the uproar after Glen Canyon Dam, the Sierra Club led a successful fight against those dams in the Grand Canyon. And because of that, there are no dams in the Grand Canyon, thank God. And it's crazy to think about, I mean, it's easy to get really down about environmentalism because it seems like such a defeating cause all the time. But you got to remember, like, the accomplishments of environmentalism over the years. Like, if you propose putting a dam in the Grand Canyon today, people would laugh at you. No one would ever even consider that. It's so crazy. And it's like you said, like moving the needle. Like the needle has moved, and it moved because of people, because of active citizens who got out there and they wrote their congressmen and they protested and they made their voices heard. And it works, man. And it's just so cool to like see this, the movement for Glen Canyon and all the other important environmental efforts that are happening out there. They can work, and I've seen it happen through history, and I'm excited to be a part of what's happening now. So that was the short version.
Yeah, love it. I would love to sit down and hear the long form version.
No, we got to go on a river trip for that.
Yeah, I mean, you tell me where, I'll be there.
Hey, just one more thing before you go. I wanted to say thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope that you really enjoyed it. A couple things that I would ask that you do if you enjoyed today's episode. Number 1, go follow us on Instagram at The Athletic Stance Podcast. Number 2, if you don't mind leaving a review, rating it, and subscribing, it always helps. It helps spread the word. It helps me know what you guys are enjoying or not. And if you don't mind leaving a comment on Instagram, letting me know what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying, I will always take into consideration. And feel free to send me a message with recommendations on who you'd like to hear from, what you'd like to hear me talk about, us talk about. And as always, thank you so much for listening, for your time, and we'll see you next time at the Athletic Stance Podcast.